Hey everyone, how is it going? I am putting up my tier list today for Wildrift patch 2.1a with all the buffs and nerfs that happened and the release of Katarina. Katarina is hard to place right now. She's an incredibly high skill cap champion that I think you'll find will get better the more people play her, but I think in a heavy CC meta, she's always going to struggle with the likes of Malphite and Alistair being super high tier. It makes her really difficult to play in teamfight situations, but I do think Katarina is good and her damage output is really strong. So I have talked to a lot of people who have played Katarina at a relatively high level. I do want to give some thanks to the people that helped me construct this tier list today. The first of which is Stuart. It's Stuart. He streams regularly. I'll put his stream link in the description and the pinned comment. He also has a YouTube channel, which I'll also throw down there too. Second is Snitch. You might be watching him on Twitch sometimes. He streams pretty much every day in the morning. And he also has a YouTube channel that he's just recently started. So go and sub to him as well. I know he'd really appreciate the support on YouTube as well as on Twitch. He is a challenger mid laner. He's really good. So definitely go and throw him your support. And also Leon. You guys remember Leon from Vainglory. He is an incredibly talented player in Wildrift. He has 4 accounts in Challenger, which is pretty nutty. And I'll link his Twitch in the description below and in the pinned comment too, because he does stream pretty regularly for Tribe. So that is everything. If you enjoyed this content, you enjoyed the tier list, feel free to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Again, tier list is purely based on early opinion and theory crafting. I've talked to a lot of people and tried to get as much information from people as I physically can in terms of placing particular champions. This may change throughout. If anything drastically changes, I will publish another one. We've never had anything like drastically change throughout a patch from a tier list that I've made, but obviously with Katarina, I think it was very difficult to place her. And finally, thanks to G2A for sponsoring the channel. Reference link in the description below. Now, let's get into the video. Okay, we're going to start off in the Baron lane here. Apologies if it's a little bit more echoey than usual. Also, if you hear some background noise going on, I am currently at my parents' house while we are moving to my new place. So it'll only be for a few weeks, maybe less than that, and hopefully I'll be back into a soundproof room where it's not so echoey. But hopefully you guys can live with it. Right, let's get into the tier list. So talk to Leon, who is the top laner, or the Baron laner from the Tribe Gaming roster, just to kind of get his thoughts, as well as mix them with some of the thoughts that I'm stealing from solo queue and also some of the high ELO games that I'm watching. Essentially, seems like Gragas and Malphite are the absolute best kind of team orientated, generally useful, very few terrible matchups. These are the 2 best top laners right now in Baron lane. I think just generally what they provide for the team, the fact that they don't have too many bad matchups in that lane either, just makes them relatively safe, but also a really solid pick in that particular role. In S tier, we have a load of viable picks. Camille, you've known that she's been quite frequent in that particular lane. Darius has now worked his way back up. The buffs were actually pretty significant for him. Yasuo is there, the Blade of the Ruin King buffs helping him out. And Akali also, she's a bit of a queen in the top lane right now as well. The only unfamiliar face that you might see is Jarvan. A lot of people have been playing Jarvan in both Baron lane and jungle as of late, and he has kind of risen up the tier list. I've seen a lot of Jarvan in competitive. I've seen quite a bit of Jarvan in solo queue. Even in Baron lane, where he's a little bit less popular than the jungle, he is starting to shine. Olaf took a hit in the Baron lane. The armor nerf definitely hurt him more so than if he was in the jungle. So he can't trade as effectively. He also takes more damage in trades with bruises. So he's definitely taken a bit of hit in the Baron lane. Fiora, Kennen, maybe Fiora should be a little higher, but she is very kind of one-dimensional compared to a lot of the picks above her. She's more of a split push champion, isn't so effective in team fights. Graves is also a pretty solid Baron laner. Also, Leon assures me. I've never played him, but I do know that it is something that is getting played in Baron lane fairly frequently. Wukong, he's been moved down. His laning phase is really terrible and is probably better played in the jungle. Tryndamere has been moved up though, but guys, can you believe it? Tryndamere is not D tier. And the reason Tryndamere is not D tier is because he has this weird AP build that is actually kind of working. I wouldn't say it's the best pick in the world, but I've seen Mozilla, who's like a Tryndamere spammer, absolutely kill it with that build. So Tryndamere, for once in his life, is not absolutely trash. I'm not going to touch on every single pick in the tier list, by the way, guys, otherwise the video would go on forever. Let's move on to the jungle. Shyvana, absolutely S+ right now. She's probably just the best jungler in the game. However, there are lots of viable junglers below her, in my opinion. Shyvana is kind of like what I'm expecting to see in most games, but Jarvan is incredibly strong, as I said before. Lee Sin is still good. Olaf is still solid. I think he's still a really reliable pick in the jungle. His armor nerf doesn't hurt him as much at this point in time. I think Evelyn's a really good jungler. I actually disagreed with a couple of the people that I talked about with Evelyn. I think she's really good in solo queue. I think she's really good at kind of abusing people out of position. She's very good at taking out individual carries. She's got great objective control. So I really rate Evelyn, but I know not everybody does this highly. So that might be up for a bit of debate. Wukong much better in the jungle than he is in the Baron lane. He's much more effective at ganking, really good post 5. And Vi, seeing quite a lot of Vi in solo queue right now as well, and she is just among a list of very viable junglers at this point in time. Amumu is good, but really only good when you see something like Shyvana locked in. Amumu kind of sucks versus anybody that's able to duel him and counter jungle him in the early game, but Shyvana's not really that much about that. She's more about just farming her way to 5, and that's kind of what Amumu wants to do too. So Amumu is kind of okay when played into Shyvana. And Graves and Xin are perfectly fine picks. Then you have Gragas. He's okay, like much better played in Baron lane, if I'm completely honest with you. Jax, again, I think Jax is a pretty sleeper Baron lane pick right now. I'm not really sure how to rate him. If you guys have been having success with Jax, let me know in the comments down below. Mundo, bit of a weak laning phase, weak jungle rather. He's not got that much gank potential, and also his objective secure is a little bit weak. So I'm not entirely sold on Mundo, even though I know it can work at lower elos. Master Yi I bumped up a little bit. I think the Blade of the Ruined King buff has actually helped him a little bit too. And Tryndamere has always been okay in the jungle. Again, I actually think he might be better Baron lane with his AP build now, but he's still not a great pick. Like, you're still going to have more success elsewhere. But for the most part, jungle right now is pretty much completely dominated by Shyvana, where she is, I think, just the best jungler overall at this point in the game. Right, let's move on to the mid lane. This was actually a really hard one to do because obviously the inclusion of Katarina has kind of shaken things up a little bit. I think for the most part, the mid lane is still absolutely Orianna and Aurelion Sol. Aurelion Sol has kind of popped back up again. Even with the nerfs to Liandry's, these two have got the most teamfight potential. They've got lots of roam potential. I think Orianna and Aurelion Sol are really strong in the current meta. I think Yasuo is now super good. I think the Blade of the Ruined King's King buffs, combined with the buffs that he had a couple of patches ago, he's kind of crept up slowly throughout the meta, and I think a lot of people are playing him. I generally tend to see a Yasuo at least one every 2 games. Akali is pretty solid, and I think Corki is also a really good mid laner. I think there's a lot of like solid picks beyond that. Ahri is good. I think the problem with Ahri is that she's very much like a pick-orientated champion. She has to kind of snowball. She's got great roam potential, but she's not as strong in team fights as some of the other champions. You have to hit your charm. She's a little bit more reliant on single target damage, which makes her a little bit more awkward. I think Zed has received too many nerfs to both his item build paths and his self to make him super viable, but obviously he's very easy to still carry games with. Twisted Fate, I used to rate him S, but I think the rise of things like Akali and Yasuo have put a lot of pressure on Twisted Fate, and also he, like, Aurelion Sol can roam at like level 2 or level 3, and Twisted Fate has to wait until level 5, so he's good, but not absolutely broken. Gragas is still okay in the mid lane. Kennen and Ziggs, I've actually started to rate Ziggs slightly more highly now, because I think Ziggs is like a super underrated pick, and I used to massively underrate Ziggs, but I've been seeing him more in competitive and more in solo queue. I think he is genuinely quite a bit sleeper. Katarina is the interesting one for me. I don't know how to rate Katarina. I've seen Snitch play her, and he like pops off and like seems to do really well. She's really good at sort of abusing like people out of position. She's really good at making like individual picks. But in team fights, she generally tends to get absolutely slaughtered by hard CC. So like Alistair's, which are popular, Malphite's, Gragas's, Orianna's Shockwaves, she really sucks against like any form of hard CC. And she really feels like a bit of a kill cleanup bot, so your team already has to have done a bit of work for Katarina to kind of shine. So I think Katarina is okay. I don't think she's OP. I think she could, you know, if people start to get more used to her and used to how you play her, we could start to see her rise up. But I think she kind of gets... she's a bit tough to play into hard CC, and hard CC is kind of the meta right now. But I do think Katarina is decent. I don't think she's trashed here. Fizz is okay, but I think he's just kind of outclassed by the other assassins that we have in the meta right now. We sometimes see Tristana and Seraphine as well. I think Annie and Lux are kind of niche. They're kind of one-trick pony picks, and you don't see them that often. Sorry about the drilling, guys. I'm trying to record the audio in between some of the work going on, so I might catch a couple of the drills in the background. I'll do my best not to. Okay, so I think for S plus in AD carries, Kai'Sa's just the best AD carry right now. I think she's the most flexible. I think she has a good mid and late game. She has a decent build path that allows her to upgrade her abilities very quickly. And I think she's also the one that does take benefit from the Blade of the Ruined King buffs, while everybody else kind of got hit by the Blade of the Ruined King nerfs. Oh, sorry, I say buffs, nerfs. It was a buff for Kai'Sa, kind of, but it was a nerf for a lot of the AD carries that aren't as attack speed reliant. And Kai'Sa is an AD carry that does have a lot of attack speed reliance, so she did quite well out of it. I think in S, Misfortune is still solid despite the nerfs. They didn't hit her damage. I think Jinx is good, and I think Xayah has become a very viable AD carry. I don't think she's S plus tier. I think the buffs were good, but they're not enough to make her absolutely insane. But I actually think she's in a good spot right now. I think whatever they've done to Kai'Sa, they shouldn't do anything else. Sorry, Kai'Sa, Xayah. I always get Kai'Sa and Xayah mixed up. Whatever they've done to Xayah, don't change it. She's in a good spot. I think Corki's been creeping into the AD carry meta a little bit, and there's a lot of like solid AD carries like Corki, Jhin, Draven, Ashe, Ezreal. They're all okay. I don't think they're insane, but you know, I think they're playable, really playable. And Corki's someone that I'm seeing played a lot in pro play, especially from Southeast Asian teams, so he may start to creep a little bit further up the tier list if we see more of him. I think Tristana's kind of I think she's kind of... I think she got hurt by the Blade of the Ruined King nerf. I think it now delays her build a lot. And so I think, yeah, Tristana's not in the best of spots right now. I think she needs a little bit of a buff. And I think Varus and Vayne are still kind of... They're kind of... I don't think the buffs really helped either of them massively. I don't think it puts them on par with a lot of the other AD carries. The Vayne has got a 2-week early laning phase. Even though the Blade of the Ruined King buffs definitely help her, she's got too much of a weak early laning phase. She can definitely take over games in the late game, but she really does need like 3 to 4 items to be able to do that. And a lot of other AD carries come online at 2 or 1 sometimes. Varus still just... he doesn't have a viable lethality build path, and that really... Like when they buff the cooldown on his piercing arrow, there's no good lethality items to combo him with really at the moment, so you can't really make use of his piercing arrow that much. He's really still an attack speed focused AD carry, and he's sorely missing Ginsu's, which is one of the key items to make Varus really viable as an AD carry in the meta. And Ziggs, I think Ziggs is okay in competitive. I've seen him in competitive a lot. I just don't think he's good bot lane in solo queue, because not many people know how to play around him correctly, and you're not going to get all the rotations out that make him really strong as a tower taking machine. We'll move on to the supports now. Alistar is almost certainly the best support in the meta by a country mile. He is just, I think, especially at high elo, he's absolutely insane. So I think Alistar's just in a really, really strong spot, and I think Braum and Jan are not too far behind. I think Rakan is close to them. I think Rakan is a great support, but requires a lot of practice and really sort of requires you to hone your skills. Everybody on the A list is pretty solid. I still think Lulu has her place, by the way. Even with the Lulu nerfs, I still think you can play Lulu effectively. And I do think we'll see Lulu come back into the meta, especially if people start to gravitate towards playing like Jinx a lot more. I still think Lulu works well with Jinx. I was convinced to put Jarvan in the support tier list at B. I'm not sure how good he is in solo queue. I think he's one of those picks that probably works well in competitive, but might be a little bit more difficult to pull off in solo queue. But a lot of the B tier supports are fine. Blitzcrank still hasn't really recovered from that the hook width nerf. It's a little bit harder for him to hit hooks now, and so ever since that, he's been in a bit of a rough spot. Soraka may be underrated, but I just think like her utility is a little lower compared to a lot of the other supports. If Soraka got a first ability range increase, I actually think she'd be really good. I just feel like you have to put yourself in too much danger to use her first ability properly. The supports in C tier are like your level 5 supports, so you're like your Malphite, your Annie, your Ashe. They all have they wait on level 5 to be useful. I don't like supports that wait to level 5 to be useful. Malphite may be a little underrated. You can spam his first ability, but he goes relatively low on mana. But yeah, I don't like supports that really need to wait to level 5 to actually have an impact. I prefer supports that can be a bit more proactive before that. And I know someone kept telling me in the comments that they played Orianna support, but she's not good. Orianna's not good in support. She doesn't get enough gold, and Orianna without gold sucks. So Orianna probably can be played as a support. You have a shield, you can zone with your ball, but she needs gold to be good, and you just don't get enough support gold as a support, and so she'll fall off really quickly in the support role, and her utility is very limited, very limited. Her shield isn't big enough. Her shockwave is kind of like if it does no damage. She's just a limited utility support. So I think Alistar, Janna, and Braum kind of majority of meta. You might see a Rakan picked up a lot more with Xayah, for instance. I'm seeing a lot more Nami and a little bit of Seraphine, but beyond that, this is pretty much the entire meta right now. So hopefully you guys can take this list and go and have a bit of fun with it, and I'll see you soon.